your radio. This is your voice.
Your voice.
This is West Africa Democracy Radio. And we are on air.
We're on air.
West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar. It's NEWSLINK. Promoting the culture of West Africa to the world. To the world. West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. This is NEWSLINK. Here are the top stories. Heads of state and government at the Dakar Peace and Security Forum urged stronger collaboration to address continental challenges. The Burkinabe army neutralizes over 400 insurgents in Somme province during an attack on a military camp. Nigeria's military junta signs decree revoking the 2015 anti-migrant smuggling law, and Liberia's Special Elite Security Service denies media reports on an alleged plot to disrupt Joseph Boakai's swearing-in ceremony.
There is no precedent of mutiny by agents of the EPS because recalcitrant behavior is not in the DNA of men and women in arms of the Executive Protection Service.
Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Here is Tawfiq Abdul Nasser with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to our listeners in Liberia, Gambia and Ghana. Let's begin here in Senegal with updates from the ongoing 9th Dakar International Forum on Peace and Security that opened on Monday with several heads of state and governments in attendance. Some 400 participants, including decision makers, military personnel, security researchers, and civilians, arrived for the two-day event. At this year's event, the focus is on sustainable socio-economic development solutions based on Africa's potential to combat insecurity on the continent. Imoredet tells us more.
But the Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau, Geraldo Matchise, an effective fight against security crisis will require improved governance on the continent.
La bonne gouvernance constitue...
Good governance is the essential condition for a country and a nation to be balanced. When this balance is broken, it is in this context that armed groups emerge and those who take violent extremism. Africa, it is true, has enormous potential, but how to exploit it for the benefit of our people, for our own good.
Mais comment exploiter au profit de nos populations pour notre bien?
The Senegalese president added that achieving this objective would entail a global vision that includes the international community. Here is President Macky Sall.
C'est pourquoi nous réclamons une gouvernance politique.
This is why we demand a more just and fairer political, economic and financial governance. Among our priorities is the reform of the UN Security Council and the world financial architecture.
De l'architecture financière mondiale.
In addition to a vision focused on socio-economic development, to overcome the security crisis, the continent must also focus more on endogenous solution. Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani says he remains optimistic about a secured Africa.
Il me plaît ici de souligner l'importance des
I would like to highlight the importance of social capital and local knowledge of African societies in the prevention, management and resolution of conflicts. The potential for solutions that this social capital offers must be made available to the world.
As a distinguished guest at this forum, Japan has pledged to support Africa in its quest for lasting peace. Several cooperation projects were announced. This 9th edition of the Forum on Peace and Security in Africa is intended to be a meeting where the continent's potential can be used to resolve security crises.
Imaradet reporting there. In Burkina Faso, a military base in the town of Djibo, Somme province, came under heavy attack over the weekend. The large-scale attack, according to the state media, was repelled by the armed forces on site. As Abdullahi Hassan reports, there has been no official communication on this attack, but sources report about 400 attackers killed during the face-off.
The camp of the anti-terrorist armed forces group in the town of Djibo came under attack on Sunday afternoon. Local sources say that the first shots were heard around 2 p.m. in the direction of the military base. According to the Burkinabe news agency, the attackers came in their thousands from Nasombo, Pope Mengao, and Barabule. Perched on motorbikes, pickups, and armored vehicles, they were armed with individual and collective weapons. The fighting lasted several hours, with the number of casualties varying from one source to another. The state media reported that the attack was repelled and more than 400 terrorists neutralized. On the other hand, the support group for Islam and Muslims, the perpetrator of the attack, indicated on its propaganda site that its men had taken over the military compound for several hours and that equipment had been recovered. Other sources put the number of civilians killed at around 50. But so far, there has been no communication from the Burkina Faso authorities on the attack.
Abdullahi Hassan filed that report. The Nigerian ruling CNSP has signed a decree to revoke the nation's 2015 law criminalizing migrant smuggling. The Nigerian Minister of the Interior, in a media interview, revealed that his principal, General Abdurrahman Chani, signed the decree on Monday. The executive decision followed a growing tension between Niamey and the European Union, which had reportedly encouraged authorities 8 years ago to pass this law to keep migrants from its shores. Ogilby Erika has a report.
According to the 2015 law, migrant smuggling is punishable by 3 to 10 years of prison sentence and a fine of between 1 and 5 million CFA francs for anyone who, in exchange for financial or material rewards, aids the illegal entry or exit into Niger. This includes non-national or permanent non-residents, as well as the use of fraudulent travel and identity documents. Due to its application, the number of West African migrants crossing the Niger border into Libya or Algeria in a bid to reach Europe has fallen from 350 a day to 100 a week because of the said law. The Sahelian nation thus became a detention ground for migrants rather than a transit country. Those detained or rescued were regularly repatriated to their countries of origin by the UN Migration Agency, the International Organization for Migration (IOM). Hard hit by the ECOWAS economic sanctions and faced with the suspension of financial aid from donors and international partners, the protection of migrants by the junta may be an extra burden, according to migration experts in Niamey. However, the CNSP has yet to communicate any reason for reversing the 2015 law. The European Union is reportedly dismayed by the development after it pushed for the adoption of this law in Niger 8 years ago to keep sub-Saharan migrants away from its shores.
Ogilby Erika with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. NewsLink continues.
Former Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz on Monday denied all charges of illicit enrichment in his final court appearance ahead of a verdict expected shortly. Abdelaziz, who led Mauritania from 2008 to 2019 before his gradual fall, delivered a monologue lasting several hours before the court that has been trying him since the beginning of the year. Sang Donald Mendy has more in this report.
In front of an audience dominated by his supporters, Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz stated from the outset that all the accusations against him are erroneous, unjust and part of a plot hatched against him. He continued before the Nouakchott Anti-Corruption Criminal Court, asking the prosecutor's office to show him his corruptor and to provide evidence of this corruption. I am directly targeted, he said, arguing that his predecessors had not been held to account. For the past 11 months, the former Mauritanian president, along with 10 other leading figures from his regime, has been charged with illicit enrichment, abuse of office, influence peddling and money laundering. He has been held since the 24th January after spending several months in detention in 2021. The son of a shopkeeper, he is said to have built up assets and capital estimated at nearly 44 billion CFA franc at the time of his indictment in March 2021. He is one of the few former heads of state to face trial on charges of illicit enrichment in the exercise of power. The prosecutor called for him to be sentenced to 20 years in prison and his assets to be confiscated. After Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz, the other defendants will take the floor one last time. The court should then retire to deliberate and deliver its judgment, which could be handed down in a few days, according to various parties to the trial.
Sang Donald Mendy reporting there. Elsewhere in Liberia, the Executive Protective Service EPS denies media reports linking some of its agents to an alleged plot to disrupt the inauguration of President-elect Joseph Boakai in January 2024. The EPS is an elite security service of the government tasked with safeguarding the President, Vice President, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, members of the First Family, and other individuals designated by the President. Philip Moore, the EPS media officer, has been speaking to this claim.
We want to make it clear that there is no plain protest by agents of the EPS to disrupt the inauguration of the president-elect, as was reported in the Friday's November 24th edition of the New Republic newspaper. EPS agents are among the best trained and most law-abiding protectors on the African continent, and that we do not have any inclination to violate the EPS standard operating procedure nor the laws of Liberia. We recognize that some of our agents have some money issue with those elected to manage the EPS Development Fund, but we observe that the newspaper dangerously exaggerated the story to suit its editorial taste. There is no precedent of mutiny by agents of the EPS because recalcitrant behavior is not in the DNA of men and women in arms of the Executive Protection Service.
Philip Moore is the media officer of Liberia's Executive Protective Service, EPS. Let's take you to Sierra Leone for updates in the aftermath of the November 26 deadly attack on military barracks and correctional facilities. The last official communication by the presidency had the army spokesperson announce at least 13 soldiers loyal to the government were killed in the gunfight. Labeled an attempt to destabilize the state, the attack was orchestrated by both retired and 7 military personnel, many of whom have been arrested and helping with investigations, according to the army. However, there remains a major security risk that worries the government of President Julius Maada Bio. Joining us from Freetown is John Whitterfield, a Sierra Leonean journalist.
The Chief Minister, Dr. David Moina Senge, together with the Acting Director General of the Salem Correctional Center and also that of the Deputy Defense Minister, they made a tour to the various prisons to assess the damage and to also talk about the prisoners that have escaped. And indeed, they saw some hallmarks in terms of where one of the locks were broken down, and which caused some of the prisoners to escape. And within that point, the Sierra Leone police also has already issued a release calling on the public to give information about any of these prisoners that they know about. Between the sum of $2,000 to $3,000 has been put as an incentive for any information being given. And also about $500 also has been put for anyone who makes arrest of any of those individuals. But what really scares you is that some of the prisoners who are on the run have returned to the Pademba Road prison, and some have even reported themselves to the nearest police station. And one of them being one of Sierra Leone's popular hip-hop musician by the name of L.A.J. L.A.J. has been in detention for quite some time now. He was one of those set free, but he has made himself return to the security apparatus of the correctional center.
John Whitterfield is a Sierra Leonean journalist. You're listening to NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Heads of state and government at the Dakar Peace and Security Forum urge stronger collaboration to address continental challenges. The Burkinabe army neutralizes over 400 insurgents in Somme province during an attack on a military camp. Niger's military junta signs a decree revoking the 2015 anti-migrant smuggling law, and Liberia's Special Elite Security Service denies media reports of an alleged plot to disrupt Joseph Boakai's swearing-in ceremony. Still ahead is the press review, the guest interview, and sports update. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. NewsLink continues.
Nigeria's Federal Executive Council has approved a budget of 27.5 trillion naira for the year 2024. This decision was made after reviewing the medium-term expenditure framework, which had been previously passed by the National Assembly. The exchange rate was revised to 750 naira to $1, and the crude oil price was set at $77.96 per barrel. WADR's Usman Umar in Abuja has more details.
According to the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Abubakar Bagudu, Federal Executive Council also approved an appropriation bill for 2024 with a total expenditure of 27.5 trillion naira or $33 billion. This is an increase of over 1.5 trillion naira or $1 billion from the previous estimate. Bagudu noted that using the old reference prices, the forecast revenue is now 18.2 trillion naira, equivalent to $12 billion, which is higher than the 2023 revenue. During the Federal Executive Council meeting, the Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee briefed the Council on its activities over the past 90 days. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, also provided an update on the financing received from the African Development Bank and the Canada African Development Bank Climate Fund. Edun said the AFDB approved $1 billion in concessional financing for Nigeria with a moratorium of 8 years. To access the market and reduce the interest rates on outstanding debt, the Federal Executive Council approved a total limit of 2 trillion naira for the Ministry of Finance, Edun said. The expectation is to save about 50 billion naira or more in debt servicing by refinancing expensive debt with cheaper funding. President Tinubu is expected to present the 2024 budget estimate to a joint session of the National Assembly on Wednesday. For NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Joining us from Monrovia now is Darlington Popper with the major headlines from the Liberian dailies.
For this edition of Press Review, we have the New Dawn newspaper, the Front Page Africa newspaper, the Hot Pepper newspaper, and the Inquirer newspaper. So those are 4 newspapers. We will begin the review process with the New Dawn newspaper. CDC men charged in an attempted mass murder. Speakership battle intensifies as several incoming lawmakers endorse Kofa's bid on the back page of the New Dawn newspaper. We are not looting offices. Nimba County Superintendent refutes report. From the New Dawn newspaper, we have the front page Africa newspaper next. EPS entangled in corruption and a calculated ploy to implicate and hold liable some board and management team members of the agency's development fund, which has backfired. 12 faces contempt over delayed 2024 national budget. Girlfriend jailed for boyfriend's crime. On the back page of the front page Africa newspaper, the hot pepper newspaper is next. President Weah departs for COP28. We see the photograph of President George Manuel Weah on the front page. AIDS Commission partners plan 2023 War is Day. Release calendar of activities. President Weah consuls the United States of America. Our last stop for today's edition is the Inquirer newspaper. Curfew in neighboring Sierra Leone as AU ECOWAS condemn the suspected coup. Rice campaigners kiss of 16 days of activism in Bowater Side. Great spotlight for Liberia and Africa. Pilot Yole. Back page of the Inquirer newspaper. 4 counties record highest SGBV cases in 2023. With that, we conclude today's edition of Press Review. On that note, thank you so much for following Press Review, and bye-bye.
Darlington Popper there with the Press Review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest interview this afternoon takes us back to Niger, where the ruling military junta signed a decree to revoke the nation's 2015 law criminalizing migrant smuggling. The executive decision followed a growing tension between Niamey and the European Union, which had reportedly encouraged authorities 8 years ago to pass this law to keep migrants from its shores. Considering the historical context, how might this decision be perceived in terms of its humanitarian and ethical implications, both domestically and internationally? We are joined by Morgan Asogwa, an international relations expert, as he analyzes the potential implications of the Nigerian government's decision to revoke the 2015 law in its relations with the European Union.
Well, this law has been passed in order to help in building a strong security architecture in terms of preventing migrants to make sure or to disturb the migration process in Europe. So this is a key law helping Europe to handle as much as possible the issue of migrants coming from Africa. And you know, even with the law, Europe is still facing some serious challenges dealing with migrants or migration, especially those migrations that are not legal.
Right. So how might this decision impact Niger's standing in the international community, especially considering its historical cooperation with the EU on migration issues?
This is a strategy that falls within what we've already witnessed with Mali. And you know how Mali decided to challenge the international community, especially European Union, and what falls in line later. So this is a situation that is getting every type of inspiration from what happened in Mali. What happened in Mali today is being used as jurisprudence in order to show the way throughout how a country which is under the sanction of the international community could manage to voice out their position and to maintain their position in order to get what they really want. The issue here is that this decision is going to affect the migration management system that have been put in place by the European Union, and obviously will lead the European Union to reconsider their position in terms of where do their interests lie the most.
So finally, Mr. Morgan, considering the historical context, how might this decision be perceived in terms of its humanitarian and ethical implications, both domestically and internationally?
It is important to highlight the fact that this decision that is being taken could also make sense in terms of economy. Maintaining such a law in position or having the deal concerning that law involves some concession from each party. And when you look at the things from that angle, you could realize that by taking the decision to cut down some of the economical cooperation or support that Europe was supposed to bring to Niger, it has affected the internal management of Niger. So when you look at it from that angle, you understand the relevance of the decision that is being taken by Niger. But this decision does not really compromise the issue of humanitarian perspective, even though it's encouraged illegal migration. It's also put into perspective the responsibility of each part in dealing properly with the issue.
Morgan Asogba is an international relations expert. Let's join Sankule Janko with the sports update.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. CAF has announced the shortlist for the women's categories for the CAF Awards 2023. For the Player of the Year, 10 players remain in the race for the prestigious individual honor, whereas the other categories, namely Interclub Player of the Year, Goalkeeper of the Year, Young Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, National Team of the Year and Club of the Year, have 5 nominees each. The ultimate winner of each category will be decided after votes from a voting panel consisting of CAF Technical Committee, media personnel from member associations, head coaches and captains of member associations, and clubs involved in the group stages of the interclub competitions. The award gala will take place on Monday, 11 December 2023 at the Palais des Congrès, Mouvbik, Marrakech, Morocco. The full list of the nominees for the Player of the Year for women are Ajarat Njot Njoya of Cameroon and Inter Milan, Anissa Lamari of Morocco and Levante La Plamas, Fatima Tangour of Morocco and Asfar, Jijlin Shebak of Morocco and Asfar, Asisat Oswala of Nigeria and Barcelona, Chimaka Ndozi of Nigeria and Paris Saint-Germain, Andelin Dlemani of South Africa and Mamelodi Sundowns, Senegal, South Africa and Zambia. These are the short list for the national team of the year. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we have come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudo Juve for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. I am Tawfiq Abdul Nasir. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening.